order this.
You can go ahead.
Okay. The Red Bank Historic Preservation Commission will come to order this 20th day of March, 2024. The time is 7 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been posted at Borough Hall, filed with the Borough Clerk, and provided to the Asbury Park Press and the Two River Times. The commission has maintained a policy cutoff hour of 8:30 p.m. for its hearings. Okay, will everyone stand to salute the flag, please? Yeah, okay, we'll have a roll call.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to do that?
Yeah. Lou Almarini,
Present.
Marjorie Cavalier,
Present.
Liam Collins,
Present.
Paul Cagno,
Present.
Karen from Metcalf. That's it. Doug Miller.
Here.
Andy North
Here.
and Betsy Valeria. That's it. So,
Yes, so we'll have a motion to accept the minutes from February 21st, 2024. Someone
I'll make the motion.
second.
okay, and then I'm gonna do roll call. You call for roll call. You can say roll call.
Oh, roll call.
Lou Almarini?
Present.
Yes, this is, that
Yes.
one's a yes. Marjorie Cavalier?
Yes.
Liam Collins?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Paul Cagno?
Yes.
Doug Miller?
Yes.
And Andy, you were not present, so.
Andy North needs to be sworn in, right?
Yes,
Mr. North, would you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? I, and state your name,
I, Andy North,
solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly
perform all of the duties
perform all the duties
as a member of the Red Bank Historic Preservation Commission
as a member of the Red Bank Historic Preservation Commission
to the best of my
to the best of my ability.
all right. I'll have this.
This is, so. I'm sure it's a lot. Okay. You don't have.
You can turn it off now. All right, go ahead, Liam.
Okay, so I started with the Historic Preservation Commission. Part of the reason was because I was annoyed that over the last 4 years, over 30 century homes have been demolished in Red Bank. And so when the mayor approached me and asked me to be on the commission, I gladly accepted. And tonight I've invited Art Pavlik, who is the chairman of the Fairhaven Historic Preservation Commission, to share with us, to get some ideas and ask him any questions that we may have, and giving us guidance as a neighbor who has a lot of experience and a lot of care for this peninsula that we all live on. So without further ado.
Yeah, if you can sit at any one of these and just pull the mic really close to you.
My day gig is an attorney, so I'm used to sitting on the defense side. So,
The audio system is really bad in here. Just pull the mic just really close to you.
can you hear me?
Just more.
Okay, so yes, thank you very much for inviting me, Art Pavlik. I've been a resident of Fairhaven for 25 plus years. I've been the chair of the Preservation Commission in Fairhaven for roughly 10 years. I was on the commission for a couple of years before that. The commission in Fairhaven has been in effect in various incarnations since probably the 1990s. what had happened at that point, and this is, kind of general information that I'm providing. It was a voluntary group that gained traction with the mayor and the council of Fairhaven to try to preserve the historic district of Fairhaven, which primarily is between Fairhaven Road and Browns Lane and northward, so on the riverside, and including the commercial district between Fairhaven Road and Browns Lane as well. So as things got off the ground, there were a couple of challenges, and in the early 2000s, there was a challenge to the way in which the ordinance was actually promulgated within the borough. And it was found that it was not properly promulgated, and the commission was set up in a manner that it really didn't have even any advisory capacity. And this was as a result of a contested application that was made. So the Preservation Commission was disbanded for a period of about 5 years. During that time, there were several demolitions. There were some houses that were constructed in the historic district that I still get discussions from townspeople today telling me, how did you ever allow that thing to be built? And I have to tell them that that's actually what happens when you have no oversight or no consideration for preservation of an otherwise intact historic district. So just, I looked at your regulation or the ordinance, I looked a little bit at what you guys have to deal with, and it's obviously much more complicated than what we have. We have a commercial district, as do we, yours is much more involved, but much more commercial development going on, and just a larger footprint of structures that you wish to preserve. We also have, by way of our charter, a couple of things. We are only advisory in nature, so we have no policing powers, although we were taken to task recently on a couple of applications whereby individual applicants did things that were directly contrary to what we had recommended. And the town was kind of put in an interesting place in terms of how to handle that. But what happens is, what we do with applications is we render basically memorandum of action. And we either approve an application or deny it, or approve it in part with conditions. And those are supplied to the various boards and commissions and the council in town. And if somebody is disgruntled or disagrees with our memorandum of action, they have an appeal right to go to the planning board. And again, it's a recommendation that we make to the planning board, but I will tell you that our planning board gives deference to I think our decisions, because we try to be, and as chair, I render these decisions, we try to be very specific, we try to be fair, but we also try to back up everything that we recommend. And in context, we found that you can't be overly egregious with certain applicants. Some people don't have the money to do certain things that we would love to see in terms of preservation, and there are limitations. So we work with business owners, we work with applicants, but obviously try to strive for the goal of preserving mostly structures. And in essence, our charter is very broad. It's not specific in terms of guidelines, which you can and can't do. It's the preservation of the structure to utilize elements and building materials and design elements that would be in keeping with the original date of construction of that structure or structures that are contiguous to that property. So it gives somewhat of a subjective bent, and we have architects, we have master builders on the commission that usually help, that have a background and materials, and we have somebody who is the chair of the Historic Association and town types, very familiar with the style and vernacular original settlement Fairhaven and district were constructed. That was a period from about 1870-ish, and now a century home would be considered obviously 1924. Not that it's limited to century homes, but that sort of time frame was where most of the historic buildings, both in the residential area and in the commercial area, were built. We also have one historic structure in the borough, which is called Bicentennial Hall of Fisk Chapel. I don't know if you're familiar with that structure. That's owned by the borough. Fisk Chapel was an African-American church that was a post-slavery church that was formed by, I think his name first name was Carlton. Fisk was his last name, but he was a member and headed up the Freed Persons Commission. President Lincoln established an area for worship and donated the land, donated the structure. So that structure was moved to Cedar Avenue in Fairhaven. It's been maintained, although it's not in a perfect state of condition. It's under our jurisdiction if any attempt to changes are made to that structure to preserve it as well. So we're limited to the preservation district, the historic district, and to that structure, but the actual parameters that we have over other structures are there, but we really don't get any applications, or our jurisdiction really isn't invoked unless it's a structure that's in the historic district. So I thought it interesting that you said you're just trying to get your traction together and try to figure these things out. You know, it's sort of like the practice. You get different types of applications, different incarnations, and you work within the parameters of your jurisdiction of what you can do, but you always learn along the way. And with that, I'll answer any questions that you have or practical considerations or things that we face. Any way I can possibly be able to assist you, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I had a question about, so if you have a structure in the historically designated area that is non-contributing, so say it's, had a lot of renovations done to it in the past, and it's, what, is there anything that Fairhaven does to help the homeowner try to bring it up to the point where it is then contributing?
Yeah, so good question. And we face that because there are a number of residences and there are a number of buildings that were built much later, and especially during the time when there was no preservation. So they could be mid-century houses or something even more modern than that. And we have a designation. It's an informal designation. First of all, our jurisdiction is invoked by virtue of the fact that those structures exist in the historic district. So anytime, even though it may not be contributing, if anything is attempted to be done on those structures, it comes before us. It's been deemed as contributing, significantly contributing, or non-contributing. And in those circumstances, what we really try to do, you can't have the applicants go back and try to make it a contributing house, even if its original construction was not contributing or the time frame wasn't contributing to the historic nature of the historic district. So what we try to do is just help them apply design elements which do not make it more egregious of a violation or a non-contributing residence or structure. But obviously those structures are granted deference. They're actually allowed to probably do more things clearly than a contributing structure would be able to, because there's not much to preserve. And there's not, again, much we can do to force the applicant to change the structure in order to make it something that would be contributing or consistent with some of the other historic structures.
I have a question. Over the last 10+ years that you've been on the committee, have you ever applied for grants or tried to secure some kind of assistance, even if it's just signage for your century homes?
So there were years ago, and there was a creation in the 1990s of the Historic Association of Fairhaven, which is a separate, non-affiliated with the borough organization made up of volunteers. They have an annual garden party, they have different speaking functions and so on. So through that organization, with approval from the council, there were century homes. There was a program of century homes or houses that you could prove were at least 100 years old, would get recognized. And there were brass plaques that were generated through donations for this independent organization that the homeowners were given. There's been some push to try to have the commission regulate that or get involved in it, but it's still an association function. And to your question about grants, the Preservation Commission does not really get involved, at least ours does not get involved in requesting grants or anything along those lines. But the association has. So right now, for example, with cooperation of the borough, the independent association is getting ADA grants through the state for the Fisk Chapel. And there are a number of other grants that are in the works to try to get state money and matching funds for the purpose of restoration and renovation of that structure. But yeah, we have never been involved in grants. Our roles have been limited here to association.
How do new properties become designated? I mean, can individual homeowners apply and say, I'd like my house to be designated, or is it the HPC itself that says we're going to designate this street? Or
Again, there's a set historic district that I've indicated. In the past, the houses that have been recognized as a century home have been the works of the owner of the property who would come to the association. And at a time when they were doing that initially, they would have to show proof of if there wasn't a deed trail that showed that the house was constructed 100 years or more older. They would have to show compelling reasons such as materials, types of nails that were utilized, what types of, the type of structure, the architectural detail that would show it to be constructed in a certain area and convince the association that it was a house that was 100 years old or older. Now it's much easier because obviously you can trace those things back. And now that, going from the 1990s, those were deeds that were going back to the 1890s. They were mostly handwritten, but once you get post the 20th century, it's much easier to trace because there's a little more of an orderly fashion. So again, if you can prove that you are 100 years old, you can apply to the association to get that designation. But it's not a commission function.
Part of the ordinance here in Red Bank is that, and I'll just read it, it's a very short sentence, about reports. The commission shall prepare an annual report for the Borough Council detailing all commission activities which shall be available to the public. Do you have a similar requirement from your commission? And if you do, what kind of things do you include on that report?
So reporting is usually handled in the minutes of each meeting and obviously contained on the agenda. We don't prepare any general reports. Our memorandum of action are based exclusively on applications for some type of construction or some type of change to a historic structure. Our commission responsibilities are to make recommendations to the planning board and try to find one that applies to what you're suggesting. Make recommendations on implications for preservation of historic sites and any other master plan elements. So there's a provision for us to make recommendations in general reports, but we don't ordinarily do that. Again, anything that comes up, in other words, we have delegates that go to the green team, which is an environmental commission, different other types of commissions. They make reports that are contained in our minutes. We have a liaison for the association for Bicentennial Hall and Fisk Chapel. Any discussion or interaction with the public or other committee members outside of the commission are contained in the minutes with that. But if we take any formal action or if we take anything to a vote, that is reported as a memorandum of action. Some are much more detailed than others. For example, this month we meet every month, obviously, when it's an agenda item. So we have, I think, just a couple of signs in commercial district this Tuesday, which will be obviously very brief memorandum of action, just consistent with other signs that we've approved, but obviously seeking to demolish a building or to materially change a building could be, 5-6 page memorandum. The other thing also is our jurisdiction is limited to what's visible from the street, from the actual, from a public street. And so anything that happens on the inside of a structure, anything that happens at the rear of a structure that would not be visible from the street, we do not have jurisdiction or take no position on. Sometimes it becomes a challenge because we have to make a decision whether or not it's, some houses are back, some houses are partially visible, some houses are visible depending on the season with leaves, but our jurisdiction is only what's visible from the street. So it's mostly facade or, facade things that we deal with, unless it's an application for the demolition of structure.
Does Fairhaven have any bluestone pavers in front of their homes?
There are, in the historic district, there was, some people have done it voluntarily, installed their own. And some, I think probably in early 2000s, there was a private public partnership where they gave loans, I think, to people, and they did a beautification project, and there are pavers on the public sidewalks in front of the houses along Fairhaven Road and Clay Street. I don't believe that they don't know, it's concrete sidewalks on Gillespie and parts of it.
Thank you.
As far as guidelines, we're trying to come up with guidelines now, and how did you involve the community in coming up with what those criteria or guidelines should be?
Yeah, coming up with the guidelines was a little bit before my time on the commission, so I can't really give you a great answer on how they came up with it. But I do know that, obviously, if you look to other towns and towns that have specific or very restrictive, Ocean Grove, Charleston, they have very strict guidelines as to what you can and can't do. I'm uncertain whether Red Bank wants to go to that sort of that kind of a format. I think the decision was made because it was a sort of a hot button topic when the commission was reformed, to leave it general and subjective, and not make it a specific guideline, so as to make it not so strict on homeowners and the population within the district, but also to give some deference to the commission in terms of how they interpret it, which could cause some trouble because, in all candor, some of the decisions could be considered arbitrary depending on our interpretation of our advisory function. And I think also when the commission was reformed, again, there was a huge outpouring of people in the town that didn't want a commission at all, wanted to completely disband it. They wanted, you can understand, people wanting to be able to, and not having any government involvement. You buy a house, you pay a lot of money, you pay a lot of money in property taxes. I don't want the government telling me what I can and cannot do with a house. And especially remodeling and monitoring structures that are, buying a house that's old, you want to make it newer. So there was a huge fight. So it went on for years within the town, and I think that's why the reincarnation of the commission is a little bit less rigid and structured than it could have been, than what we see in other historic towns. So we don't have anything, and caution with that, because you're stuck with your, the more detail, you can have volumes of detail in terms of rigid classifications. Now, question to you: when you make a decision, what is the appeal right? So I saw in the regulatory basis there's an approval and there is a denial. Is there an appeal right from a decision if somebody's denied, and are you advisory only, or?
I think you're looking at the previous ordinance. Did you get that off the website?
I did.
Yeah, that's the previous ordinance. So there's a more lengthier process now that was been instituted now that we will repeal that entire ordinance and did a more lengthier process.
What is it now? Are you guys?
Right. The appeal from the permit decision, there are two separate functions of the commission. The appeal of the permit is an appeal where the commission actually renders its report to the administrative officer. So this is all municipal land use law. And the administrative officer's decisions are appealable to the zoning board of adjustment under 70A of the municipal land use law. And it's a de novo appeal to the zoning board of adjustment.
Yeah, so you have probably a little more teeth in our.
Well, it follows the statutory granted powers, yes.
Yeah, whereas ours is an advisory, so it really just makes a recommendation. And have So you haven't had any applications in this?
This is the ordinance was redrafted, the municipality underwent a change of government. Then the ordinance was readopted after that, and so it's fairly new. 2024, under this ordinance, right?
Yes, but just to answer your question, previously we did have two appeal, applications that went before, and it went before the zoning board, and it was a de novo decision, procedure. And so, yeah, we did do two appeals before.
So my next question, obviously probably is outdated, but it has to do with informal applications. So my experience has been very favorable on informal applications, especially with homeowners. Come in, have no idea what they have to prove, what they have to provide. You know, they don't know, you hear stories that look at these stuff, paint your doors a certain way, have to do it a certain way. So I find that the informal application procedure very, very helpful to just get people to at least perfect their proofs. We don't have a straw poll or anything, but we also get an idea of what the temperature of the commission members are in terms of what they can, what they can't do, things that we prefer, things that we don't prefer, things that we don't allow at all. And I think it just makes for a much more efficient formal application when that's done. We've had people that have come in numerous times on applications to get them to a point where they can make a formal application, and it just goes much, much smoother than it would be had they come before us in the beginning. And when they come before us for a formal application from the get-go. And again, I'm very mindful of the fact, especially a residential applicant, have to pay for architects, planners, engineers, builders, time is money, and we don't want to become an enemy of the people. And I think that most rewarding aspect of it has been this sort of give and take with the applicants, and people come in with a certain plan. Sometimes the houses are very, very nice. They actually confuse taste and a nice construction and a nice designed house for what our charter is to maintain, preserve the historic nature of the structure. So those things don't, very often clash. So we have had houses that have blueprints and elevations that have gone through a complete change. And in the beginning, the people were kicking and screaming because they spent a lot of money with the professionals getting these things done. But then at the end, with the advice of us and incarnations and work with the architect, the house that they ultimately get is not only satisfactory to us and is consistent with the historic nature of the district, but is also a much nicer house that people are thanking us because they like what they're doing. They like what the ultimate product is much more than what they originally came in with. So that is a very satisfying part of what we do to have the people satisfied and fulfill our function of having a historical consistent.
I was just going to ask about community involvement. Do you have any education programs or training how to make an application, like you said, in this informal process?
Yeah, so we have a commission secretary. There's on the website, there's the forms, and again, if people have any questions, they ask the commission secretary as to what the detail is in terms of filling out the application. I tell the secretary if people have any questions to call me directly, and I'll field those questions and just assist them in terms of what needs to be supplied. Not getting into any detail as far as the application itself, but merely, supply photographs, because we have both professionals, and when I say professionals, again, architects, builders, and we also have lay people. So it's picture is worth 1,000 words. Provide photographs, not necessarily construction drawings and things of that nature, because the whole mission has to be able to appreciate what's being applied for. So that's in terms of education and historic education, that we have the luxury of having the association that handles a lot.
What is your relationship with the realtors? When they show a house, do they make sure they let the potential buyer know it's in the historic district?
Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of times they do not. where they just kind of, mention it in small print, if you will. And we've had people that were unaware, or realtors that, I don't want to say misrepresented, but really brush that under the carpet, and then people want to do significant construction, they've had to, they had a little bit of a wake up. But I think that everybody, that most people and most realtors now, because we've been functioning for so long, are familiar with it, and I think there has been a movement to some degree for most of the realtors to let people make them aware that they're within the district and they would have to come before us. And I do get a lot of calls from people that are either looking or people that are being contracted to try to find out the extent of the construction, demolition, things of that nature.
This is, I guess, a question maybe for our lawyer, even though we're not that part of the agenda. But what is the position of posting homes for sale and including that information on the posting that it's in a historic district?
I don't think that is something the commission should be getting involved with. It's a matter of private sale between different parties. You don't tell people what their zoning is. You don't say you can only build a 2-story house, you have the 20-foot setback. It's just, now, in many communities, the realtors, however, become an important part of the success of preservation, because in areas where historic homes are good value and you have a very attractive area, it's positive. So the realtor, but I don't think it's the role of the commission to get involved in.
No, I didn't think it was our role, but I was trying to get at the comment about a homeowner or somebody has now signed a contract, they submit permits or whatever, and that now they find out it's a historic district. Is there a way of, making sure it's mentioned?
There is no way for the commission to make sure it is mentioned, because you don't, all right, so preservation is an aspect of land use. You have uses, heights, densities, and there's no role of the government in saying to a private party in a contract, your zoning only allows you to have, a 35-foot high building. So it's not part of a real estate transaction. Now, on the other hand, a well-informed buyer will inform themselves of what the zoning provides. But I can only tell you that's probably very rare that they say, what can I do here? A lot of times they buy a home or buy a piece of property and the use is not permitted and they don't know. There's no requirement in state law that you disclose any zoning or any restrictions. It's really a responsibility of a buyer to do due diligence and find out what they're buying.
Thank you.
We have had, when I do get these calls from realtors wanting to get information, and it's interesting because a lot of their belief as to what we do is very different than reality. I have invited realtors in to just sit on a meeting and discuss with us, what our functions are and that sort of thing. I think that's been very helpful because these sort of myths that they may have are dispelled, and they realize that we actually work with the applicants much more than work against them. It's the fear of realtors, they don't want to get involved, and they think it's extraordinary police powers. It's not the case.
If I may, I'm a little surprised that there would be no state or county borough requirement to disclose what I think is very basic, important information about restrictions on use of a property to a buyer, especially in a town where a lot of the buyers that come in are looking to use properties as rental properties. So is there anything we can do to look into, at least within the borough, making it a requirement to disclose that information in a real estate transaction?
I think it's very important that the identification of areas that are historic is something that they come up to the planning office upstairs.
Which they do.
You have a zoning map on the wall, and they see on the zoning map that there are areas delineated as historic, okay? I think it is equally as important to have a close working relationship with realtors. There's nothing in state law that would authorize the disclosure. I would have to look into it because most people understand that if you're not telling people what their zoning is, okay? You're gonna now carve out preservation as if it's, it doesn't, I've never really seen it done. And I don't, but you do have advisory and educational functions that are authorized by the land use law. So, the best thing is communication. So put together a nice little packet and send it to all your leading realtors and say, this is a historic district here, these are designated historic sites. A lot of people are buying in the districts because they want to. On the other hand, some of them don't know that they have any restrictions, and so that is a good way at least to start. But you would have to convince your governing body, the council here, that you want to do something that is really kind of unusual to mandate in a real estate contract. It's usually done by the state legislature that they do stuff like that. So I'd have to look into it. I've never really seen anyone feel very strongly that that should be done by a government agency. I just have some concerns about it because you're pulling out one particular provision and not really looking at what I think is probably a far more problematic aspect of ownership, and that's what does the zoning allow? So, if you want to go to the council, and if this is something important, you'd have to get it done by ordinance. Other than that, you could do it by educational and advisory kinds of activities.
And thank you. And I feel zoning falls in the category of important information to a buyer, probably more important than the historical aspect. Obviously, given where we are and what our focus is, I'm leading off that. But I think generally, it sounds to me like right now, the disclosure in a real estate transaction is, and maybe this is a national problem, a lot weaker than it should be.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. And mandated disclosures in real estate contracts have come about as a result of state law. You have to notify people that if there were registered sex offenders. You have to notify them if there were certain toxic sites within their vicinity. It's done from way upstairs, so.
Also, I have to say that, in the zoning office, we do have, if a home is extremely preserved and a lot of unique features are still intact, I do get a lot of calls from either realtors or potential buyers, and they ask whether or not that structure is in a historical district or is it a historical site. So once or twice, I don't get it often, but just interested or new buyers, they do call once in a while and ask for that, depending on how preserved that property is.
Margaret, to get your attorney, do you act as counsel for the commission?
Yes, my name is Michelle Donato. My name is Michelle Donato, and
I see Marjorie.
she's very helpful. President, but it goes on.
So are you a voting member of the commission? or-
No, I'm an attorney.
Okay,
I'm
so
just
you're-
the-
so you're sitting as counsel
right.
for the.
She's an invited guest tonight, because we want to be clear about the ordinance.
No, that's.
And
that's-
so she's here to kind of help us understand more clearly what our mission is and just what we can do with our service.
It's a nice luxury to have.
Is that all the questions we have for me? Can you bid them dismiss?
Is that all the questions? Yep.
I wouldn't. really, this was really a presentation to the board. I wouldn't really open it up to the public for
Right.
him to be questioned.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna open up this part to the public right now, Cindy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Art.
If you have any questions or anybody, feel free to give me my information. It'd be great.
Great, thank you very much.
Good luck.
Appreciate you coming in tonight.
Very good.
Thank you.
But we, if we get a question later, we could always follow up and try and get the information back to the person.
Oh, yeah, now,
Oh, I guess you can go.
now we all know who Art is and he's very helpful.
Then you will just talk about the historic person. So
We're
this
gonna
is next
move on
item.
to Michelle now.
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll move on to Michelle Donato, who is the HPC attorney. And so I think some of us have sent our questions to Shauna to help her, Michelle. So I don't know, how do we want to follow this up?
I would suggest that perhaps she has some questions in advance that she could address, and then if people want to add on or ask for additional clarification, that we could, at least we have a starting point with some of the questions, and she is prepared with those.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We have just about 45 minutes left.
Okay, so the first series of questions came from Ms. Cavalier, and they're really quite excellent questions. There was a question regarding the recusal of members and if there was a minor application and there were only 2 members. I think you wanted to know what would happen if 2 members had a conflict of interest. So there's under the, what is the case law in New Jersey where judges decide and say what can be done. There's what's called the rule of necessity. And in the rule of necessity, if you don't have enough people to vote, you can call upon other people from the commission itself to fill that role. All right, so that's that. And then you said, when it's a major application, at what point should the recusal be announced before debate on the motion? If you have a conflict of interest, let's say you live within 200 feet of the property, it's your mother's property, anyone within the 3rd degree of consanguinity, anything covered by, again, there's several bodies of law addressing conflict of interest. It's a topic that applies to all boards, and it's very fact sensitive and sometimes a little bit dicey to try to iron out. In that circumstance, you recuse yourself from the very outset. You don't sit at this table, you don't participate at all. You say in the beginning, I live next door to this property, I'm disqualifying myself. You leave the table and you could go into the room or go outside.
Thank you.
That's general conflict of interest, not specific to being a preservation commission. Your next question was under procedures for designation. Can the hearing be a regular meeting or does it have to be a special meeting? It can be a regular meeting or a special meeting as you choose. There's no mandate. Then in the next question you asked about in the annual report, you asked a number of questions about the annual report. Would we be the best use of an annual report is to model it after what a zoning board of adjustment is actually required to do. Here we put it in because they wanted to do it. I think it's a very helpful way to communicate. So with respect to a zoning board, they look at applications, they explain what applications they have. They say that maybe the ordinance should be amended because we need to address certain aspects of the application. It's a very broad, flexible report. There's no mandate. It just kind of, what came before you, what were your decisions? If something did get approved as you questioned by operation of law because of failure to make a decision on a permit within 45 days, that would be something you'd want to bring up and get published to the town authorities so that they could make certain they make appropriate arrangements that things would be decided.
Okay, so I just have a follow-up to that. So the last time any listing of sites was published was 2009. And at the end, there's a table of suggested additions to be considered. So in the archives, should there be, or, you know, if the committee has not taken action on something that was recommended, because we don't want to start from bottom, you know, if there have been suggestions in the past 15 years that I don't know about, should they be in these reports?
No, you're just doing the report of the year. You're doing a report of the year in which you're taking action. You're not going all the way back, but if there was something that went, you know, something you felt needed to be addressed, then you could make a recommendation, such as there are some additional historic sites that on Shrewsbury Avenue that we'd like you to look into. Or there were, you know, you make your recommendations, you know, it's not cumulative, it's for that particular year.
Okay, so then maybe this question's for Shawna. Do we have archives of over the last 15 years? What other sites have been recommended that have not been, you know, added, or there has been action taken, either yay or nay on some of their recommendations?
That list was kind of incorporated into the main list, and that's where last year we realized that there was a lot of confusion on properties were included in the designation list that weren't properly designated and going through the entire process. So that list was then removed and we only focused on the 2009 list from the historic preservation element. So I do have another list of properties that's incorporated with our main list that, you know, I can separate out. So that we have it that were recommended over the years. And we always thought were in the properly designated, but they were not. And that's why we had to do this whole procedure here and redo the entire ordinance.
That was one of the biggest difficulties that I had when I was asked to change the ordinance, to work with them to improve the ordinance. And there were many different studies and many different properties and they all meshed together. So currently, if you look at page 9 of the adopted ordinance, the districts that are designated are the Broad Street Historic District, the Washington Street Historic District, and then you can add additional districts and sites, because sometimes it's not a district. You might have one freestanding property. So those things are all something that are you know, you may want to, for example, in your annual report, make a recommendation as to some additional properties that you would want to see designated.
But we don't have to wait until the end of the year to make that recommendation, correct?
You do not have to wait until the end of the year. You can do it at any time.
But also, just because you recommend a property to be designated does not make it designated. And I think that's where the issue happened years before. So I just want to clarify that just because the commission says, if it's in the annual report, just because it's in the annual report does not mean that it is designated as a historic site.
Which
It's,
means that the process is starting.
that just means that a process should start.
It was identified but not designated.
Yes.
Has to be designated by ordinance. And the planning board has to have in their master plan a historic preservation element which addresses the historic significance of that property. And if they do not, there is a mechanism to designate it without the planning support, but it is an exception to the rule and not the rule. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. And you have to have the criteria for designation applied. So it can start here. You know, the whole designation process starts here and can then develop and go through the other agencies that have jurisdiction. All right, now you were an eagle eye on the issue of the when does the commission report on a permit application? So the ordinance I drafted prior to the change of government provided for what is called a strong commission. Somebody has a permit application, they come to the commission and the commission makes the decision. It's subject to appeal to the zoning board of adjustments, but the commission made it. Now, the MLUL, municipal land use law, has the option of creating a weak commission. That is a commission who says, here's what we recommend on this permit. They then send that to the planning board and the planning board makes the decision. Same 45-day period. So when we went to split it up, we had a lot of people were working on this and we were trying to get this in because you had no regulation at a certain point. And 30-35 was not consistent. So you are definitely an eagle eye. And I think that, it's something that we would have to, could be changed. You just need to decide if it's 30 or 35 days because the total period of time is 45 days. If the planning board does not make a decision within 45 days, it's automatically approved.
So there's no appeal process from the Historic Preservation Commission if the zoning board fails to respond in that 45 days?
Planning board.
No, you're in a, yeah. So what happens is the permit itself is decided in this ordinance by the planning board. But the first person who looks at it, the first group is the commission. Commission then makes its recommendation to the planning board and the planning board says, we agree with the Historic Preservation Commission, or maybe they say we don't. And the property owner, if they, doesn't like the decision, whichever way it went, then has the right to appeal to the zoning board. So it's a little complicated. Most attorneys completely misunderstand this whole idea of the appeal to the zoning board. Because technically what happens is the administrative officer is the one who's issuing the permit. I call the administrative officer the mouthpiece. He really has he or she has no choice. They get this report, they get your recommendations, the planning board agrees with you, and then the AO, administrative officer, has to do exactly what he's told, he or she is told. And then that decision is appealable to the zoning board.
Okay, and then the zoning board has 45 days.
The zoning board on an appeal, I think it has 45 days. I'm not sure, I think it may be longer. I think it's 95. The 45 days is the permit review. Let me
On
just. give it
page,
to you.
page 13,
That's the 35 day discrepancy that Ms. Cavalier brought up and needs to be corrected.
okay.
That has to do with the permit itself referred from the administrative officer. There's a total period of 45 days.
Right.
When the new ordinance was put in, they added the planning board in because it is not you're no longer a strong commission. You're what's called a weak commission. But the same 45-day period applies. And so we try to split up the time that would be, how much time do you get and how much time does the planning board get? So we split it up and it changed and the 35 was 35 falls within that category.
Okay, so then, failure to report within a 45-day period shall be deemed to constitute a report in favor of the proposed work and without conditions. So failure to report within that 45 days by whom?
The planning board.
Okay, so then if the planning board doesn't report, is there any, does the Historic Preservation Commission have any power to then say, well, we don't agree with this agreement, the planning board has failed to respond, what's the recourse for the Historic Preservation Commission?
You have none.
There is no recourse, okay, thank you.
And if it does get appealed to the zoning board, which you did ask that question, that's 120 days for that appeal. That's an appeal. Permit is not an appeal. All right, so now. Mr. Collins, you asked about why we don't. Explain the general overall benefits of a property owner becoming part of a designated area. So. Many years ago, I was representing a town that had a beautiful little historic area, and it was they wanted to protect it, but they had the usual kind of debate, public debate about preservation. I call it the new kid on the block, okay? It's the newest component of land use. Came into effect in 1995, so it's not like it's been around long, at least in New Jersey. So, there's a lot of dispute. It's a lot of regulation. It's subjective. It can be rigid. You heard this fine gentleman explain those kinds of things. So this big debate went on. People all came out and room emptied out. I was the attorney for the board. It was the planning board. And everybody left. There was one man who was left behind. And he said, and the board had voted not to pursue it because there was so much political opposition. And the gentleman said, I buy historic homes and I fix them up. And I went to Island Heights, which is a little community down in Ocean County, has gorgeous Victorian homes. And I bought a house and I fixed it all up. And then the house next to me got demolished. He said, I'm not going to buy in a town that the historic values are not protected. So that was the benefits. There are people who buy historic homes. There's huge sections in the preservation magazines about historic homes. I represented the city of Plainfield for 30 years. We put in 5 or 6 historic districts. It was the uplift of the town. And they were beautiful homes, but they got protected. So that the benefits are to those who really like preservation, because it can really be a real benefit to the property value if you're not like one house sitting out there and everybody else is wrecking theirs. So that's the concept. And I find that preservation properly drafted and properly implemented is a real benefit to the community. For example, Cape May is like, I'm very proud of Cape May. Because you go there and those homes are beautifully maintained. They have wonderful design guidelines. That's the next thing that's going to happen here. They worked on integrating the historic areas with the underlying zoning so that the zoning and the historic areas are compatible. And it's a beautiful town. You walk around, people, you can't even buy a property there if you wanted to. Hardly anything's for sale. So, that's that part.
Thank you.
A little bit more difficult sometimes in a commercial context. So that's why you have your Broad Street area that it can be a little more difficult, I think. Now, I think you also asked about why there was no age. Okay, so in New Jersey, in the land use law, and you decide you're gonna have historic preservation, you get to decide the designation criteria. So we have National Register, we have State Register, which National Register regulates federal action. State Register it modeled after the National Register, and that regulates state, municipal, and county action that affects historic resources. Okay. So the National Register criteria for designation and evaluation does not include age. The National Register has a kind of an approach that says that they don't, as a rule, they do not generally accept a property to be designated if it's less than 50 years old. They have some exceptions to that. There's no minimum requirement in other than that. It's a restriction. It doesn't broaden it. So we just follow here the National and State Register criteria and did not put in age. What do you want to say, that a house has to be a certain minimum age in order to be qualified, like the National Register? You don't have to do that because you you are making your designation decisions, that New Jersey is a home rule state. Municipalities get to choose, subject to complying with the municipal land use law and other laws that might affect land use. They get to make a decision what they'd like to do. But you have that choice. Do you want age? You want to say there's a minimum age?
My thought was, because Red Bank has so many homes that are built before 1930, that collective group of homes is really what gives the town character, rather than any one, say, historic site, or it's actually the collection of all the houses together that make it a beautiful town with character. So what would be the harm in saying, everything from 1930 and earlier would be possible designated areas?
Okay, so it's not quite that broad, I don't think, and really we're going into it's less of a legal issue than it is a consultant preservation issue. Okay. Age in and of itself is not an indication of historic value and will not get you designated. The only thing on the National State Register that it does is to say that for most kinds of sites, it's not a complete rule, it's a rule with some permutations, is that you have to be 50 years old. So, but it is not age, even if it is built before 1930, doesn't mean it would be qualified to be designated. That's why they do surveys, well, historic surveys. You actually are supposed to do a survey. That's one of your obligations, that's true. So I wouldn't concentrate so much on age as I would what it is about the architecture, the layout, the design that makes that something worthy of protection. That's how the preservation consultants approach it.
So I have a follow-up to that. So one of the things that we're talking about is really looking at all of the properties on table 3 of the element that was drafted in 2009. So Liam and I have just kind of walked around town and looked at everything on there. There are some duplicates. There are some that are listed that no longer exist, that are just now vacant lots or something has replaced that. So we're trying to clean that up. But one of the things that we have been talking about, and I hope this is permissible, is listing whether a particular property is contributing or not contributing to a historic district. So that designation, being a part of a district or an individual property, would still be listed as historic, even though it doesn't look from the outside historic anymore. So we would list that as non-contributing to that district. Is that something that?
So, I mean, okay, so let's assume that you're doing a survey.
Right.
A survey, which is that's kind of what you're needing.
I could,
If you
this is
do a
what it looks
survey.
like. I'm just going around town and.
Right, so what you'd probably do well to do is to go to the State Historic Preservation Office. State Historic Preservation Office, and ask them for the survey form that they use, that's used for the National State Register. So there's certain things that you would do. You would take a photograph, you would look through the deed records, you'd find out when it was built, you'd look at its architecture, does it still have things, and they list them as contributing and non-contributing. And I think they used to call them key, but they don't have key. You might have some really landmark structures. The New Jersey land use law kind of puts them all together. You could call them either anything you want. But so you would list that, and then it defines what is the identifying characteristic of the district. What are the characterizing features of that building itself? So it's all a professional, kind of very professional approach to trying to identify what is the value of the property. And so now you get a district, and the boundary of the district is established, which is probably the hardest thing. because you really need a really good professional to do that. And some of the people I know who did that always used to say, the boundary is the toughest. Within the boundary, you have non-contributing properties. That means that it doesn't add to the character of the district. It is generally and widely accepted that you do not exclude non-contributing properties from the district. What you do is you then, because they could, sometimes they're non-contributing because they had beautiful trim on the windows and they had beautiful slate roof and they had really nice character defining features, all of which were destroyed. Somebody took them all off, okay? So they had nothing there, it just looked like, and it can, a building that came about in the area of the importance of the district could lose its character, okay? Becomes non-contributing. You regulate them, don't create what is called a Swiss cheese district. That's what a lot of people would call a district where you say, here's the district, and we're taking out this non-contributing property, and this non-contributing has all these little holes in it. Because what they put back could be worse than what's there. So we have minimal guidelines in this ordinance for how you evaluate on an application a non-contributing site. On page 19. And you know, it does have some guidance, but you know, one of the things that I have stressed, and probably until I got council blue in the face, is you need design guidelines, meaningful guidelines. Because those design guidelines become the way for you to harness your decision-making within, you know, meaningful ways that help and actually help property. I mean, I know for a fact, I got calls from people, thank God you made them do those guidelines. They were so helpful because now you own a piece of property. Is preservation a burden to you? I mean, I don't know anything about it. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I didn't know I was supposed to save my slate roof. But if I can go to the town hall and say, what are your design guidelines? And it says, here's what you do. I have some guidance, but they can also give you guidance as to what you want to do to change things. It could be very constructive if paired correctly.
I just want to add, speaking of the survey, as you were saying, the form, if in the document, I think I sent to everyone, except for the new members, and I apologize, I'll send it to you too. In the Washington Street District inventory, it actually is the survey form you were talking about. So if you want to go through that, and it does go through like the conditions of each property, is it in excellent shape? Physical condition, register, eligibility, threats to the site, things like that, which, again, is the model off of the national survey. So we do have that for the Washington Street District, and I believe for the Broad Street District. So if you go back into that, you'll actually see the survey that was done for the existing district that's there. As for the design guidelines, it is in the budget to get it done. And I'm actually applying for a grant, through MCRP, for funding to get the design guidelines done by a professional.
I have a kind of a related question to the same thing, about what we've been talking about. In the new master plan adopted February 6, 2023, on page 63, under locally designated historical districts and landmarks, it just says TBD, to be determined, I guess.
Right, so there was, it was amended to include, to say that, the districts that were in the 2009 historic preservation element, those are the ones that, they'll be referred back to. So we did amend the, that section to include, to refer back to the 2009 historic preservation element.
So, and that is.
In that version, I think that's before I printed it, before we, we amended it, yes.
That's called historic preservation. So you can have properties that are identified as historic.
If properties are identified as historic, in the historic preservation element, but may not be designated by ordinance. So when they're not designated by ordinance, but they are in the master plan, you still have the right to your advisory report on development applications. There is no permit review function. That's the distinction under the state.
Any other questions from the board members for the attorney?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelle.
I'm gonna pack up.
All right, so we'll move on to,
Well, Michelle, if you could just stick around for, just in case, just to talk about I mean, if the board members have any, have any questions about, like deregistering,
Oh, yes.
designating designating and how they go about, prospective designation, that process.
All right, so that's okay, so what,
So
how does
those are
that
the
come
two-
about? Who wants to de-designate?
well, we're referring to the list that Marjorie brought up. And so there's some properties on there that are contributing and or have been demolished. So we're wondering, as far as cleaning up the list, is it better to leave them on the list for reference, for future reference?
Are they within a historic district?
Yeah, I think that was the Swiss cheese
That's the Swiss cheese.
metaphor that she was using.
Right.
And that's my takeaway. Leave them in the survey and then just say that they are non-contributing. I think you said that we are on the right approach there, yes?
All right, so are these properties already designated in a district?
That's within the, yeah,
All
they're
right,
in
so they're in a district and they're in a district and their status has changed since the designation. They're still within the district. When they would, let's say they came to here to have some kind of an approval for something, they would establish that they are non-contributing because either they no longer exist or their character defining features have been negatively impacted. Then you would just apply the non-contributing criteria and the design guidelines.
So that's what I was asking about that.
You don't de-designate them, I wouldn't recommend.
So leave them in and not even leave them in and not even list them as non-contributing?
So you can perform the survey, update your survey. You always have the power to do your survey. It's up to one of your listed, why does it go off on its own?
Because the
Somebody
only two mics can be, well, one mic now. It used to be two mics can be on. Now it's one mic can be on at the same time.
That's when people can't fight with. Okay, so the survey, you can update that survey as part of your ongoing planning responsibilities as you choose to do so. You can identify it as not contributing. Otherwise, somebody comes before you and they say, house on this lot was a nice contributing house, it burned down. It's not there. If the survey doesn't say it, you still find out what it is. So if you want to update the survey, I think that's an excellent thing. I do strongly recommend that you also prepare your own rules as to how you want to operate. This is your commission and you can have informal reviews. They're very, very helpful. I agree 100%. And just, it'll help you because I don't, does anyone here, if Paul, you were on the previous commission, has anyone here ever worked on a board or a commission before? So you're all newcomers.
No, I was on the historic commission twice.
Oh, you
in the
were?
past 12 years.
Doesn't matter.
But no, for that very fact, we used to have people come in, and do an informal review. And it's nice to hear him suggest that because it's one way to get, even if somebody's not in the historic district, they own an old home and they want to do the right thing, so they still come to you and you can at least give them that advice and then at least that word helps get around to other folks. So it's a positive.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
Another question, we have actually a situation today where, someone removed a slate roof off of their house, without coming before the Historic Preservation Commission. And we're not sure what to do, so,
All right, so first thing of all, you're not an enforcement agency. So the unfortunate part is that somebody either didn't know, should have known, whatever they did not come before you. Slate roofs are perhaps the most difficult aspect of being able to require, because they are so costly and they are just so difficult to build. So you first, what you can do from this is to, number one, amongst yourselves, try to decide, what would you do if they did come to us first and said, we have to replace this roof? Now, there are some modern substitutes for slate roofs that look like plastic roofs, but you decide what you want to do. But I think there are two really problematic aspects. Roofing is the worst. And I was with a friend tonight who is a preservation consultant. She has been for many, many years. And so I said, what do you, because Shawna gave me a little bit of a heads up that this had happened. And what do you do in terms of your design guidelines? Do you mandate that somebody have to reproduce a slate roof? And it's really difficult because it's very expensive. So you want to decide what you really think you would want to do. But sometimes, you know, a similar color, dark gray, you know, because otherwise it's just the other one that can be difficult as well, but is easier to resolve is siding. You know, there was a woman, she's no longer alive. She was really the one who I first met when we began to fight for the historic preservation law in New Jersey. And she was brilliant. She was from Princeton. She just knew preservation inside and out. She was a consultant, not a lawyer. She said, you know, I'm really having a hard time with siding because I go in and I look and I have to do the knock test. I can't even tell. What's so important about siding is they used to come in back in the 50s and take all the trim off and all the, now they don't do that. You can put siding on an old building and it's not wood. And hard to tell that it isn't, as long as they maintain the trim and don't destroy other features like that. So that's why it's so, you know, even though you didn't get your professional in yet, remember, you're the decision makers and you have to really, you should like look at what is it that we would want. If that person came to you in advance and they said, a slate roof is gonna cost me $150,000. I'll put a nice roof, what color do you want? Can I put that kind of roof?
so what if we would have said, get engineer to look at it and see if you can repair it for $2,000 and they did that, but now it's gone, so I mean.
But you're not an enforcement agency.
Right, okay, so
You can't do anything. The town can bring them for violating the ordinance, and as I understand it, they have been notified that they're in violation, but you can't.
We have to give a report though to the planning board, I think.
Because of so they are minor work. I determined that it was a minor work, so it goes before the minor work committee. And so the minor work committee, per the ordinance, would make a decision. And then I would have to report it back to the planning board, and the planning board would, based on the ordinance, would either confirm or deny it based on what was said.
Okay, so with a minor, you have to be really careful, pause. So there's certain things you can't have as a minor. You can't demolish, relocate, remove. You can't put an addition on a building. You can't have new construction. If it's a request for approval, fences, signs, lighting, doors, windows, roofs, paving, exterior sheathing, or streetscape, it has to comply with the adopted design guidelines for the improvement proposed.
So no design guidelines.
Well, we have the we have the Secretary of the Interior standards, that's what we have. and they're broad. They're just a placeholder. So one would go to section something, H5 on page 19. And the guidelines and criteria for plan review says the exterior design arrangement, texture and materials proposed to be used. The following criteria shall be used. All exterior elevations, including the roof, must be maintained and new construction must be compatible with existing districts and surrounding areas. In-kind or compatible exterior colors must be utilized. In-kind or similarly compatible building materials must be utilized. So I don't think it complies with the guidelines. These are our documents. These
Right.
are what we have as what I call a placeholder.
So,
So you have to be careful with minor. It's not, it doesn't cover all roofs. It doesn't cover everything. It covers those particular things that apply. So if the person came in and said it's the same color, it's a similar compatible building material, but they do, I know a lot of boards who approve that fake slate.
it's falsely, it's like I've
fake- it- I
touched
call
it
it fake
before,
wood,
yeah,
but
it's like, yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's, you know, so that, that's why the minor still requires compliance with this. This is broad because we don't have adopted guidelines.
Right,
But when you do that, when you go to adopt the guidelines, you're gonna wanna really address those kinds of factors.
so the issue here also is that there's two different types of roof. There were two different types of roof. The porch roof had already been replaced with asphalt. And so now the gentleman wants to match his asphalt roof by taking down the slate to the two. So which one is in kind? If the
The roof that was there, I would say, is the one, the majority of the roof that was there.
Okay.
So.
The slate would take
preference over the roof.
You know, as to the question about whether or not it's appropriate to say to someone, why don't you look at repair? That's a very, that's the, what is the model of what you do for preservation? This, not a uniform construction code definition, but a preservation definition of ordinary maintenance and repair. You repair first before you replace. That's how you keep historic buildings in good shape, and that is why we put that in this ordinance. So if it's truly, if it's truly the same materials, the same type, etc., they're exempt. They go in, they put the documentation,
Right.
they prove they meet the criteria, and that's it, because you are encouraging what the federal, Secretary of the Interior standards recommend. But you can't, unless the town council decides to bring them to court, to force them to remove that roof if you don't think it should stay. You have no power to do that. You're not an enforcement agent. You just have the powers that the law gave you.
Okay, but in our report, we can say that we recommend that they should have first tried to repair the slate roof. And that's our recommendation, so
Yes.
the planning board can now make a decision.
Thank you.
But now,
Thank you.
5
minutes
And then, so
Just
You want
do
to
that
stop?
other piece so that we can.
I'll just stay on.
Public, comment after we do that other thing.
the perspective designation.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, all right, now I would like to, propose prospective designated, properties and districts. So Marjorie, and I want to thank Marjorie publicly for all the work she's done, already on trying to figure out which properties are contributing and which are not. She spent a lot of time pacing the streets of Red Bank, so thank you, Marjorie.
Exercise too.
And part of what she discovered while she was walking around was on Irving Place. Again, we have about 4 minutes left, but do you want to elaborate on what you found, Marjorie?
Okay, well, it's a beautiful street. if anybody hasn't walked down it in a while, it's a beautiful street and the houses are of similar era, but different, unique. And only 3 houses are designated on that street. The other thing that's on that street, it appears to me, I mean, I'm not an archaeologist, but I think it's got the only carriage block in town that still remains. So if you're not familiar, it's just a block, and this one even has the doctor's name on it that allowed you, when you were alighting from a carriage, it's not as much of a dip to get you down to the street. So, so it's the only one that I've seen in town. So I thought that that would be something that we should look into. The other 2 things that I passed around were the library, which is very associated with our industry in town, the Eisner home, or what would become the Eisner home eventually, is not designated as a historic site. But I also serve on the library board. We have a meeting tomorrow to find out a little bit more about if there are any limitations on that. The other thing that has always intrigued me, and I don't know if it's gonna get this far, is the Globe Hotel. Randy Gabriellan just spoke at the library and he has a new book out called Lost in Monmouth County. And in it, he has a picture of the Globe Hotel as it was when it was erected in 1840. And I'll just pass that down if you haven't seen it. So I was always wondering, you know, it says the Globe Hotel on it, it says established, then it has nothing underneath it. You know, what's with that? So according to Gabriellan, it is modeled after the hotel that was there that burnt down in 1936. And some books say that it is, that's the only thing that remains, is the bar and the dining room. But according to him, it was reconstructed. And so I don't know if that's why established doesn't have a year underneath it. But according to the ordinance, the way I read it, is that it represents something that was there that was very historic in the 1840s and beyond. And whoever built the bar tried to keep that in line. So it's one of those things that could be considered a vacant property, but it is very much a part of our history that should be in some way listed somewhere that it existed. So those are the things that I think we could work on, and it seems to me that every year we should at least take stock of where we are and do something about it, so. And there's a process.
Oh, yeah.
There's a process. The property owners would be notified that we're interested in designating it. And would be able to come and talk about it, you know, so. To go forward. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Marjorie. So, yeah, so I guess we'd like to announce that we'd like to make a formal proposal that the Irving Place be, we present that as a formal designated research site, I guess.
Okay, you want to actually recommend to the planning board and the governing body?
No, we want to start the process of designation.
We want to conduct a survey.
Yes,
And document
yes,
it
yes.
as a historic object, because the land use law says that a historic.
It defines a historic site, and it's very, very broad because it includes any real property, man-made structure, natural object, or configuration of anything of historical, archaeological, cultural, scenic, or architectural. So you want to be able to document that it meets any part of that definition, make it, and I would strongly recommend you get a survey sheet And from now on, you take the survey sheet and use that. This is a piece of one from, that you have in your, I got it from some of the papers here in town. And follow that criteria, because now you have it all set in line, you do it according to.
So the 50 odd houses on that street, other than the 3 that are already designated, would have to complete that survey.
Yes. If you
Well-
want to do a district, correct, Michelle?
Well, but districts are harder because you gotta figure out where the boundary is gonna go. When you say the 3,
There's 3,
That street, just that street right there.
there are 3 designated?
Yes.
3 houses already on that street.
from the 2009 master, element.
So the
So they're in the 2009 historic preservation element, they're not designated, they're in the historic preservation.
They're listed on this list. They're on
And
this-
they're not, okay. So, I would recommend to you that you try to do it a little comprehensively, so you don't get all, involved, but it could, because it could easily be confusing what you're trying to do. So for example, Shauna said you're trying to do a district. Much harder to do a district because you've got to figure out where you're putting your boundaries, and I don't do that. They have to have a certain degree of building with integrity, so you just want to do individual site recommendations.
What I'm saying is, every house on that block is lovely. Every single house.
That's Irving Place.
Irving Place, and it goes
You
from
like it?
Broad Street to Maple Street, Maple Avenue.
Okay, so you might have a district, you might be defining the boundaries as you speak.
Yeah.
Which would mean that you could, that you would follow, first survey it, and if you kind of have it in your mind already, so take.
Well, I mean,
But
it would tear me apart if somebody bought one of these houses, tore it down and put like, I don't know, like a square box in there, so that's what I'm.
So you, the first thing you want to do is, it's usually done by a professional.
Right,
And
yeah.
it's in a professional historic consultants, not a lawyers.
And I would buy them lunch every time they were in town.
Well,
So what we
You
can
know,
do
so-
about-
Shauna,
Yes.
the people who did the most recent master plan for the borough,
Borough.
do they have like a historic preservation person?
They
In
have-
a lot of these firms, I mean, you might be able to just get somebody that could come out there, draw the district boundaries, say, yes, this is what you have just said about Irving Place. It's like a little mini district. Okay, and, they could,
I mean, it is something that I can personally do,
Okay.
yeah, as a professional planner.
All right.
So-
Take your first step by not,
We don't need a motion, and can I make a motion to extend the meeting, so we have any public comment?
You don't
for
have
like a
to
minute?
extend the meeting, you just
Oh.
keep going. Until, the meeting doesn't end until you adjourn
Okay, well,
it.
I thought there was something somewhere that's.
I mean, usually it's a cutoff time for like any.
Okay. All right, thank you so much.
The Monmouth County Historic Site Inventory, which is all digitized on the county website, probably has every single one of those houses in there.
survey. That's what Gail told me tonight.
Yeah,
She said-
okay, Gail, I used to work with her.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That's why I know about it, so.
So they use National Register's survey, and I believe that those documents that I.
That's where it
those
came
survey
from,
pieces,
yeah.
They came from that.
Got it.
So I didn't know that they had that on there, so that save yourself some time.
All right.
Good, thank you.
Okay, I think you want public comment now, so then you motion to open public for public comment, you need a motion, second.
Okay, can I get a motion to open the meeting to public comment?
Motion open.
Second. Someone to second?
Second.
Voice vote, all in favor,
Aye.
All in favor?
opposed?
Opposed?
That's it,
Okay, ayes have it.
then you call for the public.
Yep, okay. Anyone want to say anything from the public? Please.
If you can just state your name and your address just clearly into the mic. Last time we didn't get that.
Hi.
Press the red button.
No, there's no red
Oh, there's
button.
no
It's
button.
just pull it close, yeah.
Dan Reardon, 20 Irving Place. So two questions. First, after I bought my house, I discovered that it is in the historic element of the master. But now it sounds like it may be in there, but not in ordinance approved. Is there a way I can find that out?
Well, it does say on the element that I have, it does have a column that says approved.
Okay.
And, let's give me a minute to find your home. I thought it was 2004. Let me show it to you.
No,
Irving, here it is,
20 Irving Place, 20,
2005.
yes.
According to this, it was approved in 2005.
Approved to be placed in the historic preservation.
Yeah, yes, so this is what I learned today, that it was approved to be in the element, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was approved by the committees, the council. So this was my comment earlier about unfinished business kind of stuff. Like what's in the archives, how come some of these are listed, how come some of these are listed twice? You know, like, why do we, you know,
But so there's no way for me, so if I want to do something to the facade of my house, what will happen with that permit? Because it's not clear
it
whether,
would come here.
not if it's not an approved house, not if it's not council
Well-
approved,
Well,
so, I'm not gonna do anything. I don't think we have it, permits from that, but.
All right, let me explain, sir. Let me just explain. This board has, this commission has two separate powers. One is to comment if you went to before the planning board or zoning board for variance. The other is to consider permits. In order to consider permits, that is, you want to change something on your house, the property has to be in the ordinance adopted by the borough council as a historic site or district. If it is not in an ordinance, and currently all we have is Broad Street and Washington Street.
Since adopted, but no.
It's a historic preservation element of the master plan. It is not an ordinance.
Okay, so if I can't find it in Red Bank Code, in the Red Bank Code repository, that means that it's not.
It is not not regulated by the borough in its ordinance.
So I don't mind if I file a permit for the historic.
Unfortunately, that's the case.
The other thing is, I appreciate what you said about Irving Place. I also love all of the houses on it. But I hope that part of your review plan is to talk to people who live on Irving Place. Because there are, I mean, becoming a historic home costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to replace. Now, we love our house. We want to keep it the way it is. And it is costing us a ton of money. Not every family that lives there will be able to do that. And so, you know, when we have the choice of spending, you know, when we had to repair our windows, every contractor, every window contractor we talked to, rip and replace. You don't want steel windows, get rid of it. No, we can't fix them. So eventually we found a company, I think they're in Newark, who would come and do it. Reserve time with them 6 months ahead, and spent a lot of money to fix the windows. We like them. But that's outside what most people can do. The slate roof, I think, is a great example too. Like, if I had a slate roof, told me how to put another slate roof on, I would sell it. You know, I don't have that much money. So it's, please talk to the people, because not everyone will be happy in the historic district. I have to say, I'm not eager to have my house regulated as a historic home. I would kind of like all the other houses on the street to be regulated though, so I may not be opposed to the district because, as you said, the advantage for a homeowner is person next to you can't ruin their old house, the value of yours. But as far as me as a homeowner, I don't want to come. I don't want to have your opinion on my house.
So,
You know, I love my historic house, I want to keep it historic, but I don't really want to be regulated.
so again, we would be required to notify each property owner that we're considering them, and they would have an opportunity when the presentation is being made to come, just like you did today, and voice their opinion on whether or not they want their property to be included in the historic district. Now, my question for Michelle would be, if that property owner says, no, I do not want my property, like Dan shows up at the presentation and says, I do not want to be in the historic district, what does that mean for the commission? Can we put the that property or include that property, or do we have to cut them out of the district?
The historic preservation, if the commission can say that if the property as a, meet criteria for designation, they would then go to the planning board. If the planning board agreed and adopted the preservation element of the master plan, again, because that's the old preservation element, there's a new one. And then it would go, there's no owner consent required. On the federal level, there's owner consent required, but not on the local. In fact, there are many, but preservation is a debatable issue, and no one will dispute that. I said earlier, there are some people who are very much in favor and some people who are not. So it's a property rights. I mean,
If it doesn't become a historic district, it would have the same sign guidelines.
Here's one thing that I think would happen, just like you see on Washington Street where it says historic district, that there would be some signage that would announce it as a historic district. So I mean,
If it were a historic district, you would get that ugly speed limit sign taken.
well, that's, I think, temporary. That's just to try and tell people you're nuts. Like, sometimes people go the wrong way down one-way streets, so, but yeah, no, I think they're just like when they made a certain intersection four-way stop on Oakland, I think it was, they left up those signs for a month just to try and train people. So, I mean.
So
that's what it-
from what I'm understanding, just so that the public has it clear, we can still proceed even if the property owner comes out and says that I don't want my property included. The commission can still move forward on every single level. But if the planning board decides that based on the public output, response, the public input decides that it's not to be a district, then if they vote no to placing it, to having designated as a district, then what does that mean for the commission?
the council can still adopt it if they want. Council can still adopt it. Council's the final decision.
Okay. I just want it on record.
Thanks very much.
They have to make the same kind of findings. The council were to decide that they want to do it regardless of the fact that it's not in the current preservation element. Similar to adopting the land use ordinance, that's not consistent with the land use element. They have to state their reason, that's follow certain procedures.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead with the
Irving Place Historic District,
Well, we'll start working on that.
okay,
With the help of Marjorie.
okay.
Um,
And the library,
we're still in public comment though. Is there, ask for another public comment?
okay, any more public comments? No,
And now you go to close public.
okay, so I move The motion to close the public comments.
Second.
Second, okay.
Okay, and then all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
And then do you want to close out the meeting?
Is there anything else anyone wants to say? Okay, so I
Motion to close the meeting.
Second.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you all.
Okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
okay, the meeting is closed.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
You got your notes there.